Picture the phone screen.
Read at 11:47. No reply since. You check it again anyway, for the fourth time tonight, like the silence might have changed if you just look one more time. You think you're missing her. You're not. You're missing something you handed over without noticing, and she just happens to be standing in the spot where you last saw it. In a minute I'll show you the strange thing your own mind is actually doing the second she goes quiet. Why an absence can pull harder than any presence ever did. And by the end, I want to show you the exact moment this loosens. Not when she finally texts back. A quieter, almost anticlimactic second where you realize what's missing was never hers to hand you in the first place. Here's how the loop starts. You know the loop. She goes quiet, and suddenly she's the only thing in the room. You replay the last thing she said, the way she looked past you, the silence where a reply should be. A man once described this exact fever. He said he could think of nothing else, that he pictured her whenever he was alone, spent hours he owed to real work just rehearsing conversations that hadn't happened yet. That was over a century ago. The technology changed, the ache didn't. Here's the question worth sitting with, before you reach for any fix. Why does someone who gives you nothing pull harder than anyone who's ever given you everything? That question is the raw material of everything that follows. Here's the first real move. Your mind doesn't only see her, it uses her. When there's a quality you can't access in yourself, the psyche doesn't leave that space empty. It finds a face to hang it on. Jung put it plainly. We imagine that which we lack. The person becomes less a soul and more a screen, catching whatever your unconscious is throwing. And that unconscious material isn't just yours. Jung described it as something generally diffused, old, shared, running underneath all of us like a current older than any one relationship. That's why this isn't really about her. It's why the same shape of unreachable person keeps showing up across different lives, different decades, different names. You're not chasing a person, you're chasing a type. And that raises the next question. Why does distance make that type feel so much bigger than reality ever could? Distance is doing something specific here, and it's almost mechanical. The less information you actually have about someone, the more room your mind has to paint. Jung noticed this too. He said that once attention slackens, once the present moment loosens its grip, fantasy simply moves in and takes the field. That's not poetry, that's architecture. Every silence she leaves is blank canvas, and your unconscious is a compulsive painter. One writer described watching this happen to other men, putting a girl on a pedestal, refusing to see her as a real, equal person, because they never actually knew her. They just loved the fantasy figure they'd painted. That's not an insult to you, it's just how the mechanism runs. So here's the open question this leaves hanging. If she's not actually who you're aching for, then who is? Let's steelman the skeptic for a second, because he deserves the airtime. Maybe none of this is archetypal. Maybe it's just neurochemistry, a withdrawal pattern, plain and unglamorous, and calling it self-discovery is just a flattering story people tell themselves to dignify an addiction. There's real weight here. Withdrawal from someone you are attached to behaves like withdrawal from any habit. The brain lights up around old cues, old routines, whether you even like the person or not. One man described it bluntly. He couldn't get his ex out of his mind. Everything reminded him of her, and the sad part was, he didn't even miss her. He despised her, but he was still addicted. That's real. But it doesn't cancel the projection. It explains the intensity, not the target. The body runs the craving. The psyche picked who to crave. Now let's go where the control lives, because this is where it actually hurts. Chasing someone who ignores you isn't only about wanting her back. It's about the unbearable feeling of having no say in how this ends. It's part of being human to want things to feel fair, to notice the imbalance and want it corrected, even quietly, even just in your own head. So the pursuit becomes a way of trying to write an ending you were never given the pen for. Every text you almost send, every plan to run into her by accident. That's not longing dressed up. That's a bid for authorship over the one part of your life that just proved you don't have any. I'm curious how this lands for you. When you've chased someone like this, was it really them you wanted back? Or was it the feeling of having a say?
Here's the piece I think you're actually grieving.
It isn't her. It's your own unlived confidence, the indifference you haven't given yourself permission to have, the freedom to simply walk away that she seems to hold so easily. Her silence feels unbearable because it looks like a kind of self-possession you've never fully claimed for yourself. Jung talked about how people project their ideas of the divine onto God, when really they're trying to love their own unconscious, that old inheritance sitting quietly in all of us. Swap God for her, and you get the same shape. The real betrayal was never her walking away. It was you handing her the one piece of yourself you never dared to hold. And here's where it softens. Seneca noticed something about grief, that as long as you keep watching your own suffering, keep circling it, it stays sharp. But the moment you stop observing it so closely, it starts to fade. And strangely, the sharper the grief, the faster it can pass once you let it. That's what happens here too. The pull doesn't loosen because she finally texts back. It loosens the moment you recognize the missing piece as yours and quietly take it back. Not with drama, not with a confrontation, just a private, almost anticlimactic click. Oh, that's mine. And the ache changes shape into something closer to tenderness than obsession. So no, she was never the door. She was the mirror you kept knocking on, mistaking your own reflection for someone standing on the other side. She never withheld love from you. She just happened to be standing where the light hit right, and your unconscious did the rest, painting a shape out of your own missing confidence, your own unclaimed freedom to walk away. The moment you actually see that, you stop needing her to turn around. You already have. If any part of this matched something you've lived through, I'd like to know which piece it was for you. Leave it in the comments. That's usually where the real reflection starts.